Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You are watching the Paris Fintech Forum Communities video interview series. I'm Elliott Gotkine, and today I'm joined by the CEO and founder of Bunq, Ali Niknam. Great to see you again.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
All right, so before we get cracking, let's learn a little bit more about Bunq. So, Ali, tell us what sets Bunq apart from other neobanks or digital banks or whatever we want to call them these days.
I think what sets us apart is our laser focus on users, and as a result of which we come up with products that they really love to use and want to use and that make their lives easy, in a nutshell.
And of course you're profitable too, which is another thing that sets you apart from many of your rivals.
Yes, so I believe that at Bunq we have always had our own strategy, which has been quite different to many of our peers. We have aspired and aimed to create a durable company, a sustainable company, and a part of that is becoming profitable and having products that actually have the ability and possibility to become profitable. And that strategy paid off, and we are indeed profitable now, which is, I think, a great relief for many people, because when you entrust your money, sometimes your life savings, to a bank, you want to make sure that it's well taken care of and the bank is stable. So, yeah.
Right, and I suppose the other unique thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you initially bootstrapped it for quite some time. And I think you've just raised an additional 100 million euros this year. But you're still the majority shareholder, if I'm not mistaken. Does that make a difference for the bank, for customers, that you're so invested in it?
I like to think it does. It allows us to focus on what we believe is most important, which is our users, rather than being distracted with other stakeholders to manage, like investors, or having to do roadshows, or having to attract additional money, or maybe doing things that are great for valuation in the short term, but not so great for users in the medium to longer term. So being able to bootstrap the company really underpinned our ability to focus on our users. And as a result, we have a product that people actually use, which is also a big difference to some of our peers. We're actually being used as a true bank. People have us as their primary bank. They deposit their salaries, they have their entire life things with us, and that's, I think, great.
You've mentioned products that people actually want. I mean, forgive me, but most people would think that there are only so many things that a bank, a digital bank or a traditional bank, can actually offer. So, you know, if you're offering savings or you know, current accounts or loans, I mean, what is it? You talked about your differentiation in terms of the products and people actually want them and use them. How is that any different from what other neobanks or digital banks can offer?
Well, people only think that because they've never experienced Bunq yet. So as soon as they start using Bunq and they use it in the way it's intended, they will notice what a great relief it is. The fact that you have all control 24/7 in your own hands. You can do everything you want. You can create extra bank accounts, which is great because you can have kitty pots and you can budget easily. You can share those bank accounts with your partner or partners or with your kids. You can have a view of what your kids are doing. You can have all kinds of security settings, enable or disable cards in certain countries, or even having that being done automatically. You can have multiple currencies. You can have multiple entities in one overview. So if you're an entrepreneur like me, you can have your company in the same overview, and you can get all of this often within just a tap in the app, or when it comes to new bank accounts, in just a couple of minutes. And none of this is even remotely possible with any of the traditional banks.
And I suppose one of the big things that happened relatively recently is you applied for a US banking license. I don't know, have you actually got the banking license yet? Because obviously the US, there's a history.
If only, I wish.
But you are going to the US. That is, you are going to be open for business to American customers, hopefully very soon. How big a change is that going to be for Bunq?
It is both extremely big and also not so big. So what's going to be the same is that we're going to target the same demographic. Bunq is the best bank for digital nomads, for people who have an international lifestyle, for people who live in one country and maybe have a house or a home in a different country, for people who like to travel a lot, for people who do business abroad. For all those people, Bunq is the best bank. And those people actually told us, and we could see this in the data as well, that the US is the biggest region after Europe that they frequently visit or they do business with or they have ties with. So for us, it was very simple in that sense to just follow our users and make sure they can use our services here as well. So that's the easy part. What's going to be fundamentally different and difficult is our exposure to a second regulator and to a second continent that where everything kind of looks similar and appears to work similar, but really doesn't. So that's going to be an exciting new challenge for us to learn from.
Okay, well, good luck with that. So we've heard now about Bunq. Let's get to know Ali Niknam a little bit better. So, Ali, Bunq isn't your first company, and I don't think it's your first foray into tech either. I seem to recall you're telling me that you got your start in technology taking phones apart when you were 2 years old. I assume that's not just smashing them like any 2-year-old would do, but actually taking them apart and maybe looking at the innards and putting them back together again. Tell me more about kind of your interest in technology and how you got into entrepreneurship.
Thank you. I'd love to. So I've always been a super curious guy. Apparently, and I don't recall this myself anymore, but my grandmother told me that at the age of 2, I would indeed take apart phones and then rewire the phone so that the ringer, the really old phone ringer, would ring all the time, and I would laugh and be happy and jolly about it. So anyway, this curiosity has brought me many places, many interesting places. And so I started coding, for example, when I was 9, and I had my first business at the age of 16. I've always just been driven by figuring out how stuff works, not just in tech, but in broader sense. It's just that the beauty of tech is that you can actually engage with a lot of things with very limited resources. All you need is a laptop and some curiosity, and you can figure stuff out, and you can create things, and you don't need a big factory, you don't need a big research center. All you need is basically a laptop and yourself.
And I think you also once told me that all you need to be happy, and I'm either quoting verbatim or more or less, is a roof over your head and a steak. You can obviously afford quite a few of each of those things right now. So what motivates you? Because you could quite easily just put your feet up or get on your boat and sail off into the sunset and not have to work another day in your life, I assume.
Yes, and that's been the case for quite a while. To expand on the steak remark, this is actually something a friend of mine told me a long time ago, and it always stuck with me. He told me, Ali, you can just eat one steak a day anyway. It doesn't matter. At a certain point in time, you have accumulated so much wealth that you can only eat one steak. So what would you use that money for? And this was during the time where I was kind of figuring out who I was as a person, what I wanted to do next. This was after my first big success with my first big company, Trends IP, today called Team Blue, the world's 3rd largest domain name and web hosting provider. And it struck me that I'm really not the type of person who enjoys doing nothing. It's kind of boring. I guess in hindsight, it's kind of self-explanatory, but in that moment in time, it came as a revelation to me that I really just simply enjoy building products that people love to use, products that move the dial, and products that help the world forward. And so that was a trigger for me to start with this amazing adventure called Bunk.
Okay, and you talked about, after your last exit, your first major exit, kind of what you felt you wanted to do in terms of building products. You can't sit around doing nothing. What do you think you'll do once you're done with Bunk?
Well, actually, I didn't really exit. I don't like exiting my companies. I like building them and just watching them grow bigger and bigger and take on their own life and their own dynamic. And I feel very proud to be still part of my very first big success, which is TransIP or Team Blue. I'm still on the board there. I'm still a significant shareholder, and the company is still doing great. The only company I've ever exited was my second company, the data center company, and that was because I really, really, really needed the money to make Bunq a success. Otherwise, I would have loved to hang on to it. And so I guess to answer your question on Bunq, I'll probably do the same as with my other companies, which is I will do my utmost best to make it a successful company, and then I see it as a part of my duty to make it independent from me. And then I'd love to sit on the sidelines and see it grow.
All right, so look, Ali, a key part of this interview is to get your take on the future of finance. But first, we are going to take a quick break, after which we're going to continue our conversation with Bunq founder and CEO, Ali Niknam. Welcome back, and don't forget, if you're not already a full member of our community, everything you need to join can be found at www.parisfintechforum.com. And now, Ali, let's talk about the future of finance. So, Ali, we've seen relatively recently a continuation of a trend, which is the biggest banks making lots of money thanks to the net interest margin that they get, thanks to higher interest rates. Smaller banks, by contrast, some of whom are kind of having to pay more interest to depositors to help keep them as customers. Is this how things are set to continue, and how much of a disadvantage does that put smaller banks, and all being well, you'll be a smaller US bank soon as well, how much of a disadvantage does that put smaller banks at, and is this just the way things are going to be for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think the way the current regulation is set up, it favors the big banks, because on the one hand, they have the implicit guarantee that they're too big to fail, right? So taxpayers, us, we end up picking up the bill if and when they fail. On the other hand, all of the regulation kind of favors them, because all the smaller banks have difficulty or significant cost to adhere to the same regulations that was actually built for the big banks. So unfortunately, I do foresee that this is not going to change anytime soon. And I think there's a bigger issue here at stake than just small versus big banks. I think the bigger issue here is that there's insufficient competition in the financial sector, as a result of which us, the people, are put at a disadvantage. So I know, I can call for it, but I don't see a change, but I'm going to do it anyway. I would love to see people reconsider the strategy of the past couple of decades that has led to this unhealthy, uncompetitive market.
And I mean, in terms of neobanks, and again, you're not obviously yet a neobank in the United States, they're waiting for that license. Many neobanks, wherever they are kind of laser focused now on profitability rather than growth at any cost. Is it possible for, I mean, you've managed to grow and be profitable at the same time, but is this something that in the sector, across the sector, is something of a conundrum, because they need to expand in order to generate more revenues to become profitable, but at the same time they need to stop spending so much money?
Well, I think profitability as a bigger part of creating a durable company has always been a consideration for us, and something that we have had a lot of focus for, because if you take your users seriously and you want to treat them properly, then you need to make sure that you have a business that's going to be there over longer term. And it's nice to see that now that the free money tap is that the faucet is kind of closing down, that many startups, not just in the financial sector, but in the world at large, are now being faced with economic reality, which is that you need to have a business that is viable. And so I think this is nothing new under the sun. This always happens with economic cycles. I mean, we had it with the dot-com boom and bust in 2000s as well. And I think it's very healthy, because many of the business models that ultimately aren't, for whatever reason, viable should be taken out, so that those resources, the people, the money, the energy, can be redistributed into companies that actually do have a future ahead of them. And I'm very much looking forward to that process. Can't wait.
I want to just switch tack a little bit now and ask you about artificial intelligence. A lot of hype, a lot of excitement about AI, in all sorts of industries. What excites you the most about AI in finance, and what worries you the most?
If you look at global productivity growth over the last 20 or so years, there really hasn't been any. And that is a problem, because the inflation that we are seeing today, by and large, is a result of that. Some other factors as well, such as anti-globalization or the reversal of globalization. But basically, us as humans, we have been becoming more and more productive over the past centuries and millennia. But for the past 20 years or so, this growth had been stagnating. And that is a problem, because obviously the result of that is, a flattening down of growth, of wealth, et cetera, which isn't good for anyone. Now, AI suddenly has the ability to suddenly and totally reverse that trend again. There is so many incredible opportunities for AI in the financial sector, but also in the world at large, to help make up for that productivity loss and start automating or doing current processes more efficiently than they're being done today. Some of the less inspired things where AI might help significantly, or more straightforward locations, is obviously anti-money laundering, where we at Bunq we were doing this already back in 2018, but now it's become more commonplace, helping users with their support questions. But actually there's a whole lot of other places where AI could help. So one of the things we're looking for is what screens in the app are less efficient. We can see drop-off numbers, and thanks to AI, we can look at user profiles and at their entire experience, and can predict and can not predict, but identify screens that need our attention because a screen is unclear or a button is there or isn't there. So I think AI has a wonderful promise in it to help humanity forward in many aspects. Now, you also asked me about risk, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, with any major technology advancement, the world is going to change. The good comes with the bad comes with the good. The change that we all want, because it will make our lives better and easier and cheaper, more affordable, etc., also come at the cost that we as human beings need to adopt to this new reality. It almost seems impossible to imagine now, but about 100 years ago, 1 out of 3 people worked in agriculture. Now it's only 2.5%. I'm pretty sure that when machines were invented at the time, like tractors and milk machines, and I'm not an agricultural expert, but whatever you use on the land, it was a gigantic promise because we suddenly could feed the world, but it was also a danger and a risk because roughly a third of the global population was forced to rethink how they could contribute to the world. So to summarize, I think AI has a wonderful promise in it and is a wonderful opportunity. But I think if the change comes too quickly, then the impact on society might be too big.
Okay. So look, Ali, it's time now for our round of rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So I've got 90 seconds on my phone. When the buzzer goes, we'll stop. Just one word answers is all I'm looking for. I'm going to start the clock and away we'll go. What fintech segment has the biggest potential over the next 5 years?
Banking.
What is the biggest pain point in your everyday financial life that you'd like to see resolved?
Overhead.
Do you think that we are at the beginning, middle or end of the fintech wave?
We're at the end of the beginning
Okay.
and at the beginning of the end.
Do you have a metaverse strategy?
No.
Have US and EU regulators kept pace with all the new possibilities and behaviours we're seeing in the financial industry?
Not at all, like any regulator.
How would you describe non-fungible tokens, NFTs? A scam, B, an interesting concept, or C, part of the future that we don't want to miss out on?
D, something that hasn't been quite figured out yet.
Okay. Have you ever personally invested in crypto?
No.
Are physical points of sales part of the future of finance?
Not to the best of my knowledge. To be precise, not to the best of my knowledge. Yeah.
Are physical points of sales part of the future of finance?
Yes. Integration of the money chain. Yes.
All right. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most likely, 1 the least likely, how likely is it that in the next 10 years, one of the neobanks will be as profitable as a top-tier legacy bank? You can answer that one, Al.
10, and it's going to be Bunq, obviously.
Well,
that's an easy one.
and that is an easy one, and also the last one, I'm afraid, because we're out of time for our round of rapid-fire questions and also for our conversation. So it was a very apposite note to end on. So I just really want to thank you, Bunq CEO and founder Ali Niknam. Always a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
And for everyone watching, we will be back again next time with another big name from the world of finance and technology. We do hope you'll be able to join us again then. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the Paris Fintech Forum YouTube channel and to follow us on Twitter at Paris Fin Forum. Of course, follow us on X, I should say, at Paris Fin Forum. That's all for now. See you next time. Bye-bye.